Have you ever woken up feeling like the day is already doomed? Like the moment you open your eyes, you're already behind? I used to feel that way every single morning. I would look outside and think, it's going to rain, or I'll never finish my to-do list, or today is going to be a bad day. The problem was, I believed it. I let my negative thoughts control my mood and actions. But one day, something changed. What if I could change my thoughts? What if, instead of thinking about what could go wrong, I thought about what could go right? So, I made a decision. I was going to change the way I think. I started telling myself, no matter what happens today, I'll find something good in it. And I'm telling you, it changed my life. No, it wasn't magic, but it was a powerful tool, positive thinking. Want to know how it works? Stay with me for this journey. I promise you, it'll be worth it. For most of my life, I was stuck in a loop of negative thinking. I didn't realize it at first, but the more I thought negatively, the more I felt like I had no control over my life. I always expected the worst, even for the smallest things. Every morning I woke up, I would complain about how tired I felt or how difficult the day was going to be. I would start my day thinking about everything that could go wrong, and guess what? It usually did. For instance, I had an important meeting at work, and the night before, I couldn't sleep well. I kept thinking, what if I mess up? Or what if they think I'm not good enough? The next day, I was tired, and my brain was filled with fear. I walked into that meeting with anxiety, and sure enough, I didn't perform my best. That experience made me feel even more stuck in my negative cycle. I thought, see, I knew it. I knew I wouldn't succeed. But one day, something clicked. I realized that my thoughts were affecting my reality. The more I thought negatively, the more my life reflected those thoughts. It wasn't just about the meeting or one bad day. It was a pattern that had been going on for years. I had been letting my fears control me. And that's when I decided to try something different. What if, instead of focusing on what could go wrong, I focused on what could go right? What if I used the same energy that I spent worrying about failure to think about success? It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I had to make a change. I had to take control of my thoughts and stop letting them control me. The first step was simple. I started telling myself, today is going to be a good day. At first, I didn't believe it. It felt awkward, almost like I was lying to myself. But I kept saying it anyway, even when it didn't feel true. I thought, why not try? Why not give it a shot? Slowly, something started to shift. I didn't feel perfect, but I noticed that little by little, my days started to feel a little better. I started paying attention to the small things, things that I normally wouldn't even notice. I saw the blue sky outside and smiled, realizing how lucky I was to be alive to see it. I found myself appreciating the warm cup of coffee in the morning, something I used to take for granted. And when something didn't go as planned, instead of feeling upset, I told myself, it's okay. I'll handle it. And the more I did this, the easier it became. After I made the decision to change the way I thought, I started to wonder, what exactly is positive thinking? I had heard people talk about it, but I didn't fully understand what it meant. Was it just about saying everything is fine when it wasn't? Or was there more to it? So, I did some research and found that positive thinking isn't about ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect. It's about changing the way we approach challenges, focusing on what can go right, and developing a mindset that sees opportunities rather than obstacles. I learned that positive thinking is about believing that no matter what happens, you can handle it. It's about choosing to focus on solutions instead of problems. When something difficult comes up, instead of thinking, this is impossible, you train your brain to think, this is challenging, but I can figure it out. It's the belief that even if you fall, You can always rise again. It's not a fairy tale, but a powerful mindset shift that changes everything. At first, I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. I thought, what if I'm just fooling myself? But I decided to give it a real try. Instead of worrying about all the things that might go wrong, I focused on what I could control. I began looking for the positives in every situation. For example, if I made a mistake at work, I didn't focus on feeling embarrassed or frustrated. Instead, I thought, what can I learn from this? What can I do better next time? That small shift in perspective made all the difference. As I started practicing positive thinking, I noticed that it didn't just make me feel better, it started changing how I approach my daily life. I began seeing things differently. For instance, when I woke up feeling tired, I told myself, I have a full day ahead, and I'm ready for it. Instead of complaining about my long to-do list, I looked at it as an opportunity to be productive and accomplish my goals. I began to realize that the way I saw the world determined how I experienced it. The more I practiced, the more I felt in control of my life. The world hadn't changed, but my perspective had. I wasn't as afraid of challenges anymore. In fact, I started to look forward to them. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by big tasks, I took them one step at a time, and I found that I could handle much more than I ever thought possible. Once I started to understand what positive thinking was all about, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just thinking positively. The hardest part was taking that first step. It's easy to say, I'll think positive today, but actually acting on it, especially when life feels tough, is a challenge. That's when I truly understood that positive thinking isn't just a mindset. It's a choice you make every single day. The first step I took was simple but powerful. Every morning, instead of rushing into my day with worry, I started by taking a few deep breaths and reminding myself, today is going to be a great day. I wasn't lying to myself. I was choosing to believe that something good would happen, no matter what came my way. But there were days when this was hard. There were mornings when I woke up feeling tired, stressed, or unsure about the day ahead. On those days, I really had to push myself. I would feel like staying in bed, avoiding responsibilities, and ignoring everything that needed to be done. But instead of giving in, I told myself, just get up. One small step. That's all it takes to start. It wasn't about feeling great right away. It was about getting started. I learned that starting the day, even when I didn't feel like it, was often the hardest part. Once I took that first step, the rest of the day seemed easier. It was like I was giving my brain the signal that I was in control. The small action of getting out of bed and doing something positive, even something simple like making my bed or having a healthy breakfast, started a chain reaction. For example, when I had a big presentation at work, I used to be scared. I would get nervous just thinking about speaking in front of people. But now, I told myself, I can do this. And you know what happened? The first few minutes were tough, but after that, I started feeling more confident. I realized that positive thinking had helped me break through the fear. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about showing up and doing my best. As I continued to take these small steps, something amazing happened. I found that positive thinking wasn't just about feeling better. It actually helped me get better. I started seeing results, small ones at first, but they grew over time. I was more productive. I was more confident. I was more optimistic about the future. I even started enjoying challenges more. I realized that taking action was the secret. Positive thinking wasn't just about wishing for things to go well. It was about trusting in myself enough to take the steps that would make things go well. Even on tough days, I knew that I could handle whatever came my way because I had the power to make it work. After a few weeks of practicing positive thinking, I was beginning to feel more confident. But then, one day, I faced a situation that truly tested my new mindset. It was a day that I had been dreading for weeks, the big presentation at work. I had spent days preparing for it, but as the day approached, I started to feel the familiar weight of fear and anxiety creeping in. The night before, I barely slept. I kept thinking, what if I mess up? Or what if no one understands me? The old, negative thoughts flooded my mind, and I started to feel like I was back where I started. I began doubting myself. Maybe I'm not ready for this, I thought. But then, I remembered the lessons I had been learning. I paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and reminded myself, I can do this. I told myself, I've prepared. I know this material. I can handle it. I decided that, no matter what, I wasn't going to let fear control me. I wasn't going to let my negative thoughts take over. The next morning, I walked into the office and felt my nerves rising again. But instead of letting those feelings overwhelm me, I decided to take control. I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I'm ready. I repeated it a few times until I began to believe it. Then, I entered the meeting room with my head held high, ready to face the challenge. During the presentation, my nerves were still there, but they didn't control me. Every time I felt the panic building up, I paused, took a deep breath, and reminded myself, I can do this. The more I focused on my preparation and not on my fear, the easier it became to speak clearly and confidently. And you know what? It wasn't perfect. I made a few mistakes. But instead of feeling embarrassed or frustrated, I just kept going. Every time I made a mistake, I thought, I'm learning, and that's what matters. I even laughed at myself when I made a funny mistake, and the people in the room laughed with me. That made me feel so much more at ease. By the time the presentation was over, I felt a sense of accomplishment like never before. I had faced my fears head-on and survived. I had taken that first step, and despite the nerves, I had done it well. The feedback I received was positive, and that gave me the confidence to take on even bigger challenges in the future. What I realized that day was that positive thinking doesn't mean you won't feel afraid. It doesn't mean that challenges will go away or that everything will be easy. But it does mean that you can control how you respond to those challenges. Instead of letting fear stop me, positive thinking gave me the courage to keep moving forward, step by step. That experience taught me something powerful. When you think positively, you change your response to difficult situations. You don't let fear paralyze you. You don't let failure define you. Instead, you focus on the opportunities for growth and improvement. Positive thinking doesn't remove challenges, but it gives you the strength and confidence to face them head-on. One of the most important lessons I learned on my journey with positive thinking is the power of the phrase, I can. For most of my life, I was stuck in the habit of saying, I can't. It felt safer, easier. When something seemed hard, I would tell myself, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. It's too difficult. But over time, I realized that by saying, I can't, I was giving up before even trying. I was letting fear control me, instead of taking control of the situation. So, I decided to make a change. Every time I caught myself thinking, I can't, I replaced it with, I can. It didn't happen overnight, but as I started using this new phrase, I began to see results. It was like switching a light on in my mind. I stopped focusing on all the reasons I couldn't do something, and instead, I began to focus on what was possible. The more I practiced saying, I can, the more it became a natural response. The first time I really tested this out was during a challenging project at work. We had to meet a tight deadline, and the pressure was on. At first, I felt overwhelmed. The task seemed impossible. The old me would have said, "This is too much. I can't do it." But instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I can do this. I will break it down into smaller steps." As I worked through each part of the project, I kept repeating, "I can." It didn't mean I wasn't afraid or that everything went smoothly. There were moments when I felt frustrated, when things didn't go as planned. But instead of quitting, I reminded myself, "I can handle this. I will figure it out." Every small victory helped me feel more confident. I kept making progress, one step at a time. By the end of the project, not only had I completed everything on time, but I also felt a deep sense of pride. I had faced my fears and doubts, and instead of running away from them, I worked through them. And guess what? The "I can" mindset made all the difference. It wasn't magic. It was simply about choosing to believe that I could do it. The more I used "I can" in my life, the more opportunities one saw. I started to believe in my abilities. When challenges came my way, instead of feeling defeated, I thought, "Okay, this is hard, but I can figure it out." That simple shift in thinking opened up a world of possibilities. The "I can" mindset didn't make problems disappear, but it gave me the confidence to keep going, even when the road got tough. And you know what? I started noticing something incredible. The people around me began to react differently, too. They started seeing me as someone who could handle difficult situations. My positivity, my belief in "I can," inspired them to think the same way. When they faced challenges, they would say to themselves, "If my name can do it, I can too." The power of "I can" isn't just about boosting your own confidence. It's about creating a ripple effect. When you believe in your ability to overcome challenges, you inspire others to do the same. And that's when you truly begin to see change, not just in yourself, but in the people around you as well. Before I started practicing positive thinking, I was terrified of making mistakes. I believed that making mistakes meant I wasn't good enough or that I would fail. I saw failure as something to avoid at all costs. But over time, I began to realize that mistakes aren't failures, they're lessons. They're opportunities to learn, grow, and become better. One day, I made a big mistake at work. I had miscalculated some numbers in a report, and it was noticed during a meeting. I felt embarrassed. My face turned red, and I could hear my inner voice saying, "You messed up. You're not good enough." I wanted to disappear. But instead of letting that moment define me, I took a deep breath and reminded myself, "I can learn from this." After the meeting, I reflected on what went wrong. I thought about how I could improve my process and avoid making the same mistake again. It wasn't easy. The negative thoughts kept creeping in, but I didn't let them control me. I focused on the lesson I could take away from the mistake. I asked myself, what can I do better next time? And that was the key moment. Instead of criticizing myself, I looked for solutions. I took the time to double-check my work before submitting it, and I set up a system to review my reports more carefully. That mistake turned into a valuable lesson that helped me improve my work habits. And instead of feeling discouraged, I felt empowered. I realized that the mistake was a part of the learning process, and it made me stronger. Since then, I've adopted a new perspective on mistakes. I no longer fear them. In fact, I welcome them as opportunities to learn. The more I make mistakes, the more I grow. The more I fail, the more I improve. It's like every mistake I make is a step toward becoming better. And with positive thinking, I've learned to celebrate mistakes as part of the journey toward success. For example, when I started learning a new skill, I wasn't perfect at it right away. But instead of giving up, I reminded myself, I'm just learning. It's okay to make mistakes. Every time I got something wrong, I would laugh at myself and think, next time, I'll get it right. The more I practiced this mindset, the more confident I became. I stopped fearing mistakes and started seeing them as stepping stones to success. And guess what? The more I practiced this approach, the more I improved. I became more willing to try new things, and when I stumbled, I picked myself up and kept going. Each mistake was less scary, and I started to enjoy the process of learning. It's true what they say, failing is a part of succeeding. So, the next time you make a mistake, remember, it's not the end of the world. It's just a moment to learn, adjust, and keep moving forward. The more mistakes you make, the more you grow. And that's what truly matters. As I continued on my journey of positive thinking, I realized that my environment had a huge impact on my mindset. I had always heard the saying, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." At first, I didn't think much of it. But after practicing positive thinking for a while, I began to notice something important. The people around me were either helping me grow or holding me back. Before, I had spent a lot of time with people who were negative and constantly complained. They talked about how difficult life was, how unfair things seemed, and how nothing was ever going to get better. I used to join in on these conversations, sharing my own frustrations and fears. But I started to realize that this kind of thinking wasn't helping me. It was dragging me down. I decided to make a change. I started to surround myself with people who uplifted me, encouraged me, and helped me see the bright side of things. I sought out friends and colleagues who were positive, ambitious, and focused on personal growth. These people weren't perfect. They had their own challenges, but they didn't let those challenges stop them. Instead, they faced problems with a mindset of solutions and possibilities. At first, it felt uncomfortable. I had to step away from conversations that felt familiar, but also draining. I realized that I didn't need to listen to negativity anymore. I didn't need to be around people who constantly complained or focused on what was wrong in the world. I needed people who inspired me to think bigger, to take risks, and to believe in myself. Slowly, my life began to change. The more I surrounded myself with positivity, the more I began to see the world in a new light. Conversations became more uplifting. I found myself talking about goals, dreams, and achievements, instead of problems, complaints, and failures. I started to feel more motivated, more confident, and more excited about my future. But it wasn't just about the people I spent time with. It was about the environment I created for myself. I made sure my home, my workspace, and my daily routine reflected my positive mindset. I got rid of clutter that stressed me out. I filled my space with things that made me feel happy and inspired. Every morning, I'd make my bed, light a candle, and set the intention for the day. Today will be productive, positive, and full of possibilities. Creating a positive environment meant cutting out distractions. I started limiting the time I spent on social media, especially when it was full of negative news and endless comparisons. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered: my goals, my health, and my personal growth. I surrounded myself with books, podcasts, and motivational content that kept me inspired and focused. The more I surrounded myself with positivity, the more it began to reflect back to me. I found myself thinking more positively. I found myself speaking more positively. And soon, I found that I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be. Someone who wasn't afraid of challenges, who didn't let negativity control their life, and who was actively working toward their dreams every day. The people around you, the things you listen to, and the environment you create matter more than you think. They play a huge role in shaping your mindset and your reality. So, take a look at your environment today. What's feeding your mind? What are you allowing into your life? Surround yourself with positivity, and you'll be amazed at how much it helps you grow. One of the most important things I've learned on my journey of positive thinking is that small wins matter. It's easy to think that success is all about big, dramatic moments, like landing your dream job or completing a huge project. While those things are important, I've discovered that the little wins along the way are just as valuable, if not more so. These small victories keep you moving forward and help build momentum toward bigger goals. When I first started practicing positive thinking, I was focused on the big picture. I wanted to achieve big things, and I thought that once I reached those milestones, everything would fall into place. But I quickly realized that those big moments didn't happen overnight. The truth is, they are built on a foundation of small, consistent actions. And those small actions, when celebrated, are what make all the difference. I began to pay attention to the little things I was accomplishing every day. For example, I started waking up a little earlier in the morning and getting a head start on my day. I wasn't waking up hours earlier, just 15 minutes, enough to set my intentions for the day, enjoy a cup of coffee, and start the day with a positive mindset. This small change made me feel more organized and productive. It wasn't a huge shift, but it made my day feel better right from the start. I also started to focus on the little things at work. Instead of only celebrating big achievements like completing a major project, I started acknowledging the smaller wins. Maybe I finished a task earlier than expected, or I solved a problem that had been bugging me. At first, these victories didn't feel like much, but as I began to celebrate them, I started to realize that these small wins were what kept me motivated. They made me feel accomplished, and each one brought me a little closer to my bigger goals. Even in my personal life, I began noticing and appreciating the small wins. Whether it was making time for a workout, reading a chapter of a book, or cooking a healthy meal, I learned to acknowledge my efforts. I wasn't waiting for the big accomplishments to feel proud of myself. Instead, I celebrated the daily actions that helped me grow. By focusing on these small wins, I started to see progress in every area of my life. The more I celebrated the little things, the more I felt motivated to keep going. It wasn't about perfection, it was about making consistent effort and recognizing how far I had come. And here's the thing, those small wins add up. Over time, the little victories you celebrate turn into big achievements. What starts as a small change in your morning routine or a small task at work can snowball into bigger successes as you build momentum. I also realized that acknowledging small wins wasn't just about feeling good in the moment. It was also about strengthening my mindset. When you focus on your progress, no matter how small, you train your brain to see possibilities instead of obstacles. You begin to believe that you are capable of achieving whatever you set your mind to. You stop focusing on what you haven't done yet, and you start recognizing how much you've already accomplished. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the big picture, remember this: small wins matter. Celebrate them. Enjoy them. Let them motivate you to keep going. Success isn't always about the big moments. It's about the everyday steps that lead you to your goals. Every small win brings you closer to where you want to be, and that's worth celebrating. One of the hardest things about positive thinking is staying motivated. It's easy to feel excited at the beginning, but what happens when things get tough? What happens when you don't see immediate results? I learned that motivation doesn't always come naturally, and sometimes you have to create it for yourself. For me, one of the keys to staying motivated was setting small, achievable goals. Instead of focusing on the big picture, I started breaking everything down into smaller steps. If I had a big project, I didn't focus on finishing it all at once. Instead, I set daily goals. Today, I'll complete the first section, or today, I'll research the first part. This made the task seem more manageable, and every time I crossed something off the list, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Another thing that helped was reminding myself of my why I started in the first place. When things got difficult, I asked myself, why do I want this? Whether it was about my career, health, or personal growth, reconnecting with my purpose helped keep me moving forward. It reminded me that the hard work was worth it in the end. I also discovered the importance of celebrating progress. Instead of waiting until the end to celebrate, I began recognizing the little wins along the way. Whether it was sticking to a new routine or finishing a task ahead of schedule, I took a moment to acknowledge my hard work. This helped me stay positive and energized. Finally, I learned that motivation is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And even when you don't feel motivated, taking small actions helps build momentum. Sometimes, the key is simply to keep going, even when you don't feel like it. In those moments, positive thinking becomes the fuel that keeps you moving. One powerful tool that helped me stay on track with positive thinking was visualization. At first, I thought it sounded too simple to be effective. How could imagining something in my mind help me in real life? But as I started learning more, I realized that visualization isn't just daydreaming. It's about mentally preparing yourself for success. Before any important event, whether it was a meeting, a presentation, or even a tough conversation, I would spend a few minutes visualizing success. I imagined myself feeling confident, speaking clearly, and handling any challenges with ease. I pictured the positive outcome I wanted. At first, it felt a little strange, but the more I practiced, the more I began to feel that I could make these positive outcomes a reality. It gave me the confidence I needed to face challenges. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, I focused on what could go right. Visualization helped me see myself as capable and successful. It didn't take away the nerves or fear completely, but it gave me a clearer focus on how I wanted to show up in those situations. When you visualize success, you are training your brain to believe in your abilities and trust that you can handle whatever comes your way. Over time, I realized that positive thinking and visualization are powerful allies. They work together to help you build a mindset that supports your goals. When you see success in your mind, it becomes easier to make it happen in real life. Another practice that transformed my mindset was gratitude. It sounds simple, but it had a huge impact on my life. When I first heard about practicing gratitude, I wasn't sure how it would help. How could saying thank you every day change my life? At first, I started small. Every night before bed, I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for. They didn't have to be big. Sometimes it was just the fact that I had a warm meal or that a friend had sent me a nice message. Other times, it was something bigger, like finishing a big project or having a good conversation with someone. What surprised me was how powerful this simple practice became. The more I focused on the things I was grateful for, the more I started to notice them in my daily life. Gratitude shifted my focus from what I didn't have to what I did. Instead of complaining about the things I wanted, I started to appreciate the things I already had. Gratitude also helped me stay positive in tough situations. When something went wrong, instead of focusing on the problem, I would ask myself, what can I learn from this? What can I be grateful for? Sometimes, it was simply the lesson I learned or the fact that I had the opportunity to try again. This shift in thinking helped me handle difficult moments with a sense of peace and positivity. The more I practiced gratitude, the more I realized that it wasn't just about being thankful. It was about training my brain to see the good. The more I focused on what was going right in my life, the more I noticed it. Gratitude helped me shift my mindset from scarcity to abundance. It reminded me that no matter how hard things got, there was always something to be thankful for. As I practiced positive thinking, I realized that one of the biggest challenges I faced wasn't external, it was internal. My thoughts were my biggest obstacle. I often felt that negative thoughts came automatically, and I didn't know how to stop them. It felt like my mind was constantly working against me, telling me that I wasn't good enough or that I would fail. But then I learned an important lesson. You don't have to believe everything your mind tells you. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. This idea was a game changer for me. I realized that I had the power to challenge my thoughts and replace them with something more helpful. The first step was becoming aware of my thoughts. I began paying attention to the stories my mind was telling me. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. This is too hard. These thoughts were constant, but I started to notice them. And once I noticed them, I could start changing them. Whenever a negative thought came up, I asked myself, is this true? What evidence do I have that this thought is real? Often, I realized that the negative thoughts weren't based on facts. They were based on fear and doubt. And when I could see that, I felt empowered to change them. The next step was replacing the negative thoughts with more positive, constructive ones. Instead of thinking, I can't do this, I would tell myself, I can try, and I can learn. Instead of thinking, this is too hard, I would say, I'm capable of handling challenges. By consistently replacing negative thoughts with more positive and realistic ones, I began to reshape my mindset. But it wasn't just about replacing one negative thought with one positive one. It was about creating a new habit of thinking. Every time a negative thought popped up, I had to make a conscious decision to reframe it. Over time, it became easier. The more I practiced this, the more natural it became to think in a positive way. What I realized is that your thoughts are powerful. They shape how you feel, and how you feel shapes what you do. If you constantly tell yourself that you can't do something, you won't. But if you tell yourself that you can try and improve, you'll find that you're capable of more than you think. As I continued to challenge my negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones, I started to feel more confident. I felt like I was finally taking control of my mind, instead of letting it control me. It wasn't always easy, but with practice, it became a habit. And that habit led to real change in my life. One of the most important shifts I made in my positive thinking journey was in how I spoke to myself. Before, I was my biggest critic. Whenever I made a mistake, I would say things like, I'm so stupid, or I can't believe I messed that up again. I was constantly putting myself down, even if the mistakes were small or didn't really matter. I didn't realize it at the time, but this self-talk was having a huge impact on my confidence and ability to succeed. So, I decided to make a change. I wanted to stop being so hard on myself and start speaking more kindly and positively. The first step was catching myself when I said something negative. For example, if I made a mistake, instead of saying, I'm stupid, I would say, I made a mistake, but I can fix it. If I felt nervous about a challenge, instead of thinking, I can't do this, I would remind myself, I'm capable, and I'll do my best. It wasn't easy at first. Old habits die hard, and it took time for me to break the cycle of negative self-talk. But every time I caught myself thinking something negative, I would consciously replace it with a more positive, supportive thought. Gradually, it became easier. The more I spoke positively to myself, the more I started to believe it. This change in self-talk had a huge impact on my life. I started to feel more confident in my abilities. I didn't fear making mistakes anymore, because I knew I could learn from them. I started to embrace challenges instead of avoiding them because I believed in my ability to succeed. And slowly, my mindset shifted from one of doubt and fear to one of possibility and confidence. Another important change was celebrating my progress. Before, I often ignored the small wins. I was always focused on the bigger picture, and I would rarely acknowledge how far I'd come. But as I started speaking more kindly to myself, I began to celebrate every little step forward. Whether it was completing a task ahead of schedule, improving a skill, or simply sticking to a positive habit, I started to give myself credit. This self-encouragement became a powerful tool. It not only made me feel good in the moment, but it also kept me motivated to keep moving forward. Every time I spoke positively to myself, it reinforced my belief in my abilities, and I became more confident in taking on bigger challenges. Positive self-talk doesn't just change how you feel about yourself, it changes how you act. When you speak positively to yourself, you start taking action in a way that reflects your belief in yourself. And the more you take action, the more you prove to yourself that you are capable of achieving your goals. One of the biggest mistakes I made during my journey with positive thinking was waiting for the perfect moment to take action. I thought that I needed to feel completely ready, that everything had to be aligned before I could make a move. I kept telling myself, once I have everything planned out, then I'll begin. But I realized that this was just another way of procrastinating. The truth is, there is no perfect moment. There will never be a time when everything falls perfectly into place. If you keep waiting for the right time, you'll end up never doing anything. The key is to start right now, even if you don't feel fully prepared. I learned that progress comes from taking action, not from waiting for the perfect conditions. One day, I decided to take a leap of faith. I had been thinking about starting a side project for a while, but I kept putting it off because I didn't have everything figured out. Finally, I told myself, just start. You'll learn as you go. I made a plan, took the first step, and got to work. The moment I started, I felt a wave of excitement and fear. But most importantly, I felt alive. Instead of waiting for the right time, I was doing something, and that momentum kept me moving forward. The more I worked, the more I learned. And with each mistake, I got better and more confident. As I continued to take action, I realized that the right moment was never going to come. The only thing that mattered was making a start. Every step, no matter how small, brought me closer to my goal. And with each action I took, I built momentum, which made it easier to keep going. When I stopped waiting for the perfect time, I realized that I was capable of much more than I thought. The fear of failure and the desire for perfection had been holding me back. But once I let go of those things and started taking action, I was amazed at what I could accomplish. So, if you're waiting for the right moment to start something, whether it's a project, a new habit, or a change in your life, stop waiting. The right moment is now. Just start, and you'll figure it out as you go. The key to success is not waiting for everything to be perfect. It's starting and adjusting along the way. As my journey with positive thinking continued, I realized something very important. It's not just about the destination, but the journey itself. I had spent so much time focusing on my goals, on the end results, that I forgot to enjoy the process of getting there. I was always looking ahead, thinking about what I would achieve next, and forgetting to appreciate where I was in the moment. I learned that positive thinking isn't just about thinking that everything will work out perfectly. It's about being present in the moment and appreciating the steps you're taking, even if they seem small. The journey itself is where the growth happens. It's where you learn, change, and become better. I had always been focused on reaching my goals as quickly as possible. But the more I practiced positive thinking, the more I began to realize that it's okay to take your time. It's okay to enjoy the process. Each step forward is progress, and it's worth celebrating, even if you're not yet at the finish line. When I stopped rushing to the end, I started to find joy in the small moments. Whether it was learning something new, overcoming a challenge, or simply taking time for myself, I began to appreciate everything that came with the journey. I realized that the journey is what shapes us. It's where we grow, where we face our fears, and where we discover our true potential. Along the way, I also learned to be kinder to myself. I stopped focusing on how much more I needed to do and started appreciating what I had already accomplished. There were days when I felt like I wasn't making progress, but positive thinking helped me realize that every effort counts. Even on days when I felt like I had done nothing, I knew that just showing up and trying was a victory in itself. I stopped measuring my worth by my achievements and started measuring it by my effort, my attitude, and the positive changes I was making. It wasn't about perfection, it was about growth. And as I embraced the journey, I found that I was becoming more confident, more resilient, and more at peace with myself. The journey is long, and sometimes it can feel challenging. But if you can embrace it, you'll find that the path itself is just as important as the destination. And with positive thinking, you'll have the strength to keep going, step by step, enjoying every moment along the way.